Okay, Dan,
You ready?
I think so.
We'll call this meeting to order. Greg's about 15 minutes, 20 minutes out.
Great.
It'll be, what's that?
Greg is 15 minutes.
Yeah. So, I guess first we should approve the agenda. The additions or deletions. I make a motion to approve. I'll second. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So right on to Sugar Village, Todd.
Thank you. Todd Olin with Land.
It would be helpful if you could come up to the podium if that's okay.
And then they're behind me.
Yeah, but I don't have them in the camera. It's just so that the commission and the presenter can be, you can keep that off since you're presenting.
I gotta be able to see the screen.
Oh, okay.
And the PowerPoint.
All right, well, okay. When we get to that point, then I'm going to have that focused on there anyway.
Good morning. Todd Olin with Land Professional Services. First of all, thank you all for getting together today for this work session. There was a misunderstanding by me. This is why we're running late. I thought it was a forum, and it had to be in public, and it had to be recorded, it had to be Zoom. So I assumed some things, and it wasn't the case. So Keith is actually covering all those items right now for me, basically, because of my misunderstanding. Kent Titcomb and Brenton Titcomb are online watching from Florida. They are the developers. Back in 2018, there was some conceptual work done, and you just go to the next once you started. There we go. And then the next slide. Thanks. So yeah, back in 18, there was some conceptual work done on this property, and since then, there were a lot of technical issues that came up, some white papers and reviews that were done by the city engineer, WSP, and so it went on delay for approximately a year, and since then we took another run at this. We got, and what I mean by run is that initially there were a lot of costs that were being incurred about for what are we doing with offsite utilities, how are we running those from so far away into this development, how do we approach not only getting the utilities done to serve our development, what happens with when there's another city expansion, how do we plan for that, what about sizing of the water main. So we looked at, there was some background work done by WSP to that estimated the size at that point at a 12-inch to serve our development with fire protection, domestic water, as well as future expansion. So there's a lot of details that were coming up that were very costly. So it just kind of went on hold. And since then, we've reinstituted what's going on out there, taking a little bit different approach. And at the time, this was now last year, fast forward to 2020. And then with all of the COVID items going on and the elections and things like that, around about December, we didn't really need to put it on hold again, but we just thought it'd be the best case to hold off at that point because there was a lot of staff changing going on, a lot of new faces. And this today is really a culmination of all these different meetings we had, presentations we had, to kind of bring it all together, to bring everybody up to speed of where we're at. We still are absolutely committed to this project, but I wanted to, it seems like when I call one group and check in, there's some misunderstandings as to, what is the scope? What what's going on, why is that in the city and this isn't. So I just thought it'd be a good idea to come and kind of bring it all together as to where we are. And then there's also in the background of all this, and in your forefront, is that the PUC and the city are working much closer together now. Whereas before we were, we were going to different groups to address different things. And this can be more of a comprehensive approach just by waiting and then bringing you up to speed and then going on from here. So what I wanted to do was go through what the project is, where they're located, because there's really two primary projects that we're talking about, Sherburne Lakes and the Sherburne Village. Or two. Yeah, actually, this. I'm going to start with the Sherburne Lakes and then explain the way through with maps. By the way, I think I told everybody, but what you see up here is mostly for my use, so I can point and stuff, but you have smaller versions on your desk that are exact replicas of this. So, and they're clearer than obviously looking 25 or 30 feet across the room. It's certainly clearer than the fuzzy pictures I can put on the screen. So this is just a little bit of background. This is the project or the project property for the Sherburne Lakes development. And this blue outline includes the 64.9 plus or minus acres that we're dealing with. A lot of which is, we had a wetland delineation done back in 2018. And a lot of this is encumbered by wetlands that we're doing the best we can to avoid any impacts because eventually we'll need to get permitting done. And one of the first things they'll look at is when you do to avoid the wetlands. So go to the next. And this is just the GIS beacon version of what are the city limits right now. The yellow is city limits. This currently is within the city limits. It's kind of a jaggy boundary, but at some point or another, this was annexed into the city. So this is currently part of the city proper. The subject property does lie within the city. Based on the old or the original effort in 18, there were some concepts done on this property that showed a 55 plus senior community. The lots are for rent and the homes are owned. And they looked at several alternatives with water, when does the loop come in, where does the loop go, all kinds of different scenarios before it went on delay, and then we picked it up again last year. Next one. The concept in 18, the various things that were considered are, what is the size of the water main, like I said before, where is it located? And the reason I keep bringing this up is because our approach is a bit different. We tried to take the approach of not only sitting in the shoes of the developer and analyzing costs and benefits and whatnot, but also trying to look at from the city's perspective. And the city has weighed on some of these, but not all. There's a lot of work to do on this project before we get to a point where we're saying we're confident the engineering and studies and everything are acceptable. This is very preliminary, very conceptual. So we looked at it from both scenarios, and then next slide. So our first step was really to bring together all the historic data, what was done, where are we at now. We went through and made several revisions to the layout, to what else say, make it flow better, incorporate some of the developers' desires as far as are they going to be, where does the water main go? Where does the lift station go? That's not this group's concern, but certainly from an access standpoint, from a maintenance standpoint, future growth standpoint, we did some significant changes on the utility side of things. So right now, the most recent concepts includes 113 single family homes for the 55 plus community. The way it's laid out, the way that the wetlands, we can look at it a couple of different ways. The wetlands are an encumbrance, like I said before, or we can lay it out in such a way that these are the backyard views to all or most of the lots that are set up there. The only exceptions are the ones in the direct center of the site where we're going to put a stormwater basin. So basically, there won't be backyard to backyard scenarios here where you walk out your back door, go in your backyard behind your unit, you're immediately in somebody else's yard. They are planning on a significant clubhouse structure that's a multi-purpose room, and that will be, we're planning on locating that here. Again, it's got wetland frontage. It's a multi-purpose room, indoor, outdoor, as well as park management and office space. And then the way we set this up was direct access from County Road 2. And this, sorry about this label, this is a local road name, but this is County Road 2. And that's 124th, the service drive to the west. So we have access from both the south and the west. And then we have this set up currently, and this is a culmination again of different departments weighing in, our developer weighing in, us weighing in. But right now it's set up with private roads throughout, so they'll be privately maintained. They'll be set in, the way it's set in now is a 40-foot wide easement for park use, as well as in some cases, we're planning on or hoping to put in public utilities within an easement in portions of it. Next slide. So this is the layout that you're looking at on your desks in front of you. This is a little bit dumbed down so that there isn't as much information here and it doesn't get as paint bloody, so to speak. But yeah, we have private roads. The private roads are about 26 feet wide. Outside of that will be a surmountable concrete curb on both sides of the road. And then the homes will be set at the setback from the back curb. Go to that side. These are some examples of the homes and what some of these are from another development in Florida that he's done that's almost exactly the same as far as demographics and design and whatnot. But we wanted to give you a feel for what you'd be looking at. These are pre-manufactured homes. They're mostly are all double wides. They all have, in this case, in most cases, they have screening porches and garages and all the comforts of home. Go to the next. I just wanted to point out some different characteristics of what you're seeing is there's different siding features, there's different layouts, there's different, just like you would in any other neighborhood. Next, please. And then the next one. Then I gave you some interiors just to show these are open floor plans. They're pretty spacious, but generally speaking, the folks that are living in these don't want a ton of space because it's whatever space they have, they're maintaining, cleaning, and everything. So, next please. So going in from the site plan, I'm transitioning now into the utility plan. And these are all our proposals. Okay, this is again a culmination of comments we heard from thus far from PUC, we heard from streets, we heard from the city in general, and how we arrived at this plan. We're planning to extend a 12-inch water main along 4th Avenue South, which is here. And this is a utility plan. I'm going to get this up here in a second. There is a 12-inch water main that exists in this road here. We plan to pick up the 12-inch here and run it down 4th Ave South into the development, and then through the development out to the service drive 124th, as well as extend it down to County Road 2. A couple of reasons for this is, number one, we can get, once we're at County Road 2, we're at the city limits, and there will be more development, more expansions in the city. And according to WSB, and we confirm that this is a good point of expansion. When it needs to expand in whatever direction, south or east or whatever, it can be, and it's of adequate size. Now, when I say those things, please keep in mind we're very early in this process, and what we're doing is presenting a concept, and there's studies and surveys and engineering and all these things that have to be done as part of the process for not only design, but then review and approvals and whatnot with the city, as well as PUC. So again, just emphasizing this is our proposal at this point. Not that it, again, is a main concern of this group, but I think it's important that We are planning on putting a lift station down here. Initially, back in 18, it was up here in this corner. We thought for accessibility and future, and we can have the maximum depth there at the lift station, that it would be better placed down here. Now, we confirmed that with Streets and Sewers, and they agree with that in concept. And then force main would be installed all the way to the wastewater plant. So whatever happens in the future can connect to that, and it would be pumped up to the wastewater plant. And this will come up later in our discussion, but the sizing, there's been a lot of questions about what size is it, who pays for what, when does it go in? As far as oversizing for future, we've coordinated with WSP thus far, and design is done so far. But basically, the developer is saying, basically, when we put this in, we'll size it appropriately for future development at what costs the city. So the size will be sized for our development as well as future development. Now, that's going to take additional work and coordination from WSP to look at what is the potential service area and depths associated, and coordinate with them and say, okay, the depth here really needs to be X. Hasn't happened yet, okay? All we're saying at this point is that we're accepting the costs into the project by the developer for the upsizing that's necessary to get the we are proposing that, and this is based on other concepts that we did. We reviewed when we went to streets and wastewater at city. We with part of it's for, do we have on or not? Part of it's for snow storage. And at the end of that conversation, basically, we couldn't get the width they needed for a public right of way, because what happens is it pushes these units both directions, and we've got either property lines or wetlands that restrict us in both directions. So the other part of that is that the developer is really interested in keeping this low speed neighborhood and quiet as much as possible. So the solution to the comments we heard at the time were to we put the public utility, public 12-inch water main in a public easement as opposed to a public right-of-way. Now, that includes what we have proposed now. I'm just pointing again, but the 12-inch would extend and then extend up here. So there would be an easement that would cover the public portion of the system. And we're looking at, if that's possible, can these homes along the alignment of the 12-inch be connected directly to that water main? And you know, in my mind, in my experience, it would really all comes down to, can we make a city standard connection to a meter and the home like we would any single family home? There's been some discussion, not solved yet. Last heard was, and Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, but a slab on grade with 4 courses of block, given the existing scenarios inside the homes, may be acceptable. But more review needs to be done.
Yeah, well, I mean, the intent is that the water meter, we want the water meter inside the thermal envelope of the house.
Right.
So heat tape, which is something that is commonly asked, is not a permanent solution.
Right.
And we want to avoid failure modes that puts a huge liability onto the ratepayers.
Right. No, I understand that. So yeah, there's additional details that we have to work out in order to say, number one, is it acceptable to put these homes on that type of foundation and be in conformance with the city standard? That's fair.
Well, like you said, we're very early in the conversations that have to happen.
Exactly. So, and I'm hitting some of these things because we've had a lot of discussions up to this point. I'm just trying to, again, bring us back all up to speed. I have a note there on the on the connections that we have to keep working on. We haven't really finalized the concept on whether or not it really is tied into, can we make the connections and be in conformance with the city standard with the 12-inch connections, as to whether or not we put the 8-inch pipes in the cul-de-sacs and make those public or private. Right now, we have it proposed as only that portion that has to be public to make this work is public. And then the other, say, for example, this water main, the water main going on the loop right here would be an 8-inch private and then metered before a connection to the main, the 12-inch main. Does that raise any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
You've got the 12-inch, and then you've got a nice loop in the middle for water. But then you've got a long dead end water, which could go to the northwest. I don't see a loop back to the system anywhere. How would you handle, because I mean, in all my experience, you don't want to have people sitting on a dead end water service.
Well, that's
Is that still
partially accurate. There's a lot more detail that goes into that than just saying there's no dead ends, but it really comes down to fire protection from that one. It comes down to so you can stir the fire, you can stir the basket. And the last thing is redundancy. So there's always a number of units that are acceptable on a dead end, and I'm not sure what that number is in the city of Princeton. But ultimately, with a 12-inch, Michelle, we have it proposed out here and then looping back into the system.
correct? I'm not worried about the 12-inch. I'm worried about that string of proposed single family units there. You know?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about. I understood that from your presentation that the 12-inch is going to get looped back into the system. I was concerned more about those folks that are living on the end of that nice northwesterly extension of your development, and how water at the end of that is going to function, or if it needs to be looped in. And I'm just raising the question, and maybe it's too early in the process, but that would be something I would be a little concerned about.
Right, and I share that with the number, again, going back to the number of units here,
Okay.
that, yeah, we may be looking at the end of the day, we may need to loop this back to the
Okay,
system.
so it's in the back of your heads, and that still needs to be further studied. is what you're saying.
Absolutely. And the last thing I forgot to mention with dead end mains, one of the concerns is stale water, of course.
Yeah.
It sits in a pipe, it gets old and smelly. So what we've done with dead end mains, not that this is a solution we're going to settle on here, is that we put bleeder systems on that are timed based on the volume that's being used. The use itself does flush systems. That's what we want, is use in the pipe.
Yep.
It flushes the water in. And then where we don't have a higher use, or say there's a interim low use. So say this is built and we only have 4 homes on it. Like most developments, they all don't just show up and boop, you have 40 units on the system. If we did the day one, the stale part probably wouldn't be much of an issue. But in this case, we will have to look at that. So good point, Michelle. And it's not to really discuss any of these things because that's why we're here. So the next slide, please. So this is just a picture again. It's a little fuzzy on the screen. I apologize for that, but that's exactly what's here. Is what's in front of you. The only thing that's different is at one point, Keith and I were looking at a different alignment for water main that came out around this way. And on that one is an old one. This one is eliminating that part of the loop. And the reason being is just simply based on cost. We get to a point where we're at maximum density on this thing for cost. I'm going to go through some rough numbers later just to share, how many linear feet we're doing with public water main, public wastewater. And then, so adding those types of costs were without going back with all the discussions and whatnot, but that's one of the things we don't have on the plan right now. Going to take further discussion. So, I mean, there were other alignments discussed as well in previous meetings. So this is the one that we're proposing at this point. Next thing. A lot of the things that we had to consider were the distance from the existing utility. That's really a key here. Why is this unique? Why is the next developer that walks in going to say, well, we want to be like them, or we want to deal with the same way you did? Is that there are very unique circumstances here, and that when you consider the distance of the public water main extension, there's over 9,300 feet of 12-inch water main that have to be installed to loop the system. And the way we're proposing this is basically under the premise that we are setting this up for the developers putting it all in, and the city doesn't have to get their wallet out, so to speak, for all of this infrastructure to go in. And we're trying to do this in such a way that it keeps the city involved to know what are the future plans, how do we plan for those things, and while we're doing it, how best serves everybody involved. So yeah, currently we're at about 9,350 feet of water main. So there's a significant cost associated with that. The private versus public utilities, and these are just me listing out challenges. And that's, again, it's a combination of what we've heard, what we've done so far. But at least a portion of this has to be in public because we need service, we need water. The other part is, can we combine that in the development with between private and public? Absolutely. We just need to be able to work those details out. And the reason that we're doing it this way is we started this in 18, and we kind of got stuck in the details and costs that were overwhelming. And so what we did is we tried to reformat a bit and say, how could it work? How could it work for everybody involved? And again, we're not saying this is it. We're just throwing it out there so we can have these discussions to go forward. The developer, and there's going to be a lag, so it might be hard to hear from what his thoughts exactly are on this, but basically, we're not asking PUC or the city, for that matter, to vote on anything, to make motions, because we're not there. All we're asking for is a format to build some confidence in our approach, so that the developer's confident to spend the money to design this thing and get it ready for the site plan reviews that are required, and all the design, all the geotech, all of the surveys, everything that's involved. It's a pretty significant cost. So that's really what this is all about. The challenges, private versus public, I think we can work through those issues, but we need to really identify what city policy is on the public utilities within utility easements as opposed to right-of-ways. This is kind of a roadblock that we ran into. I'm not exactly, I mean, if we can make the connection details work out to be city standard, conform to city, then I'm not sure what the difference is. So there's more discussion. I really need to hear from this board, this group, on opinions on going forward on that, because we tried putting public roads through and they just didn't work. We lost about 30% of our lots just because where the wetlands are and whatnot. So that's one thing I really need to weigh in on. The city PUC fees associated with installing public utilities this far off site to extend down to and through the site and set it up for future expansions, as well as then turn around and pay to connect to them, as well as trunk fees to connect to them. And then location alignments of the public water main. Again, this is something we really need to weigh in on because there were a lot of different, I'll point out one, like for example, the loop going down here as opposed to going through where we show it. There was some discussion as to when it comes down, maybe it comes down this way for future to, again, provide it to County Road 2, but then a different alignment that may be a public road in the future. Again, discussions. We need to solve where that's going to be, because what we're trying to do here at the end of the day is eliminate a private utility, water main utility, right next to a public water main utility. If we do a 12-inch water main through the development, don't allow connections to it, I will need to put in a second pipe to connect to that goes to a meter and then connects at one point. So I'm trying to make this an economically feasible solution as well and eliminate the doubling up of pipe. And then looped public water main versus dead end water main in the system. Again, Michelle, right? You hit the nail on the head. We need to do additional evaluation of, where are we looped, when it gets looped. There was we forwarded some information on late on Saturday morning, but it included a WSB technical letter that basically evaluated a different layout, same number of units, but a different layout in the water main. And the two main questions that were posed to WSB at that time was, can a 12-inch dead end provide fire protection in domestic water to this development? And the answer from just the water supply angle was yes. There's adequate water with a dead end. Now, does that solve the stale water problem? No. Does it solve the redundancy problem? No. So we've got other issues we've got to address. And that's what we had proposed to put the loop in for. So we have that redundancy, we have a loop system that again could be expanded in the future. Next slide, please. So our responses to these, when I went through the previous slides, I just listed challenges. With these ones, the text in blue, so the costs associated with the water main to and through the project, that's for everybody to see. There's really no way around that. We need water. So the cost to extend the 12-inch water main up to and through the property at 9,450 feet, so we're pushing that 1.5 miles-ish of water main at about $60 a foot. So if you do the math, it's about $600,000 to get the water main in. And then consider we've got all the 8-inch water main to serve the rest of the units. All the other improvements that are standard to every other development, road building and sidewalks and parks and clubhouses and all that other stuff. The public versus private utilities, the 12-inch water main, the public utility that extends from the point at 4th Ave South, and I'm just again reiterating what our plan is or what our proposal is, and the importance that we eliminate having a main go through and then come back and put private utility next to it. You can imagine the cost is not at double because one's at 8 and one's at 12, but they're significantly more that way. And the big thing, individual meters versus metering groups of homes. I think, well, at the end of the day, this concept right here proposes both. We're requesting that we have the 12-inch go through the site and connect to the 12-inch directly with meters, where that 12-inch is along that line. Right now, we plan on water main going through this loop down here as an 8-inch water main that's private with a meter. So it would be metered, for example, if this, like Michelle was saying, if this loops around and connects back to 12, we'd have a meter here and a meter here. So that would be the way the bill would be generated based on that meter reading. And then maintenance, installation, and everything associated with that would remain private. With the 12-inch, the developer pays putting it in, the design goes through inspection by the city, and eventually would be dedicated to the city as part of their infrastructure. Individual bills would be sent, if we can get, again, those details worked out with the individual meters, individual bills would be sent to those homeowners connected to the main. The rest of the bills at the meter would be sent to the park, and he would either divide it up or just bury it in their rent, somehow that way. Next slide, please. Oversizing water main for future city expansion. Again, there was an evaluation done by WSB, and the questions were asked. First of all, we can serve just, if it were just this, and there were no other city considerations, we could do this with an 8-inch water main for fire protection, for whether we loop it or not, really. The pressure is there, the water supply is there. The 12-inch is really the solution, and the developer is not volunteered, but agreed to putting a 12-inch in the ground at no cost to the city. So we're upsizing it for the city to benefit everybody involved. And again, back to, we're extending it to the edges of the site so that future expansions can occur. And then public versus private roads within the project. We reviewed this a little bit, but we did look at a concept that had all private roads. We looked at another one that had some private roads and some public. And it just, we lose space based on where all the wetlands are. And they're really, this, for example, is all wetlands. So there's very limited space that we can develop on this upland where we aren't impacting wetlands significantly. Next slide. Public utilities within utility easements as opposed to right-of-ways. And I've been told that this is a policy, but there seems to be some confusion on my end, probably. But in the city here, just in my involvement with the city, there's 2 examples I can think of where there are public utilities in easements. Right now, for example, there is a public utility right here in an easement. And then further north, there's a development we did with the new Brew Pub, not built yet. And I've been told last week it's still coming. I'm still optimistic. But with all the COVID and everything going on in restaurants being closed down and open and closed down and whatnot, at limited capacity, they're waiting to see what happens with all that before they build. But as part of that, we put a water main in on plan and showed it dead ending down Golf Club Drive to the restaurant, and the city came back and said, it'd be a lot better system with redundancy. Let's put it on this side of the building and go north and loop it. And it would be in a public easement, private, a public utility in an easement. So there's other examples of that going on here. The public utility easements are relatively, there's nothing new under the sun here. It gives the right and access for maintenance and everything that the city needs forevermore. It's perpetual. It runs with the land. It doesn't go away if somebody sells a piece of property or whatever. But anyway, next slide, please. Now, I'm not sure if you guys want me to stop and talk about Sherburne Lakes real quick, or you just want me to go into the next piece of this pie.
You mean Sherburne Village?
Sure. The previous one was the lakes,
Oh, yeah.
and then I'm going to move into the village. Rick?
Maybe it would be reasonable time to take some questions now.
Yeah.
No questions are popping up. If anyone has any?
No, I just have a comment about the easement for the public utility and the going through on a private road. The only my initial off-the-cuff comment is that I don't see, and I can't speak for the utilities, but from the sewer, for the water part, but from the sewer part, I don't know that I would have an issue with it. My only concern would be is that we would need to have either a recorded developers agreement or a memorandum of understanding. I'm all for short documents, just to say that, okay, we need to go in and fix a leak or replace something on the 12-inch main. How do we address who fixes the street or the private road? So that would be the only thing off the top of my head that would be something that we would need to sort of iron out as to, how do we respond to that, that type of thing.
Yeah, and I'll go back to my default response of other utility easements. In the way that they work, and of course, there will be a developer's agreement on this, and all this is kind of going to build up to that or define all these things. But in the past, with a default utility agreement, if the water main needs to be replaced, the city comes in and does their work to remove what's in the way. If it's normal, the street, whatnot, they would remove and demo what's there and necessary to remove to get to the water main, replace it. It's the developer's responsibility to put the street back in. Same is true with a fence in a utility easement. Same is true with landscaping in a utility easement.
I just think that would need to be clear so that, assuming that this moves forward and we come up with a very nice development, which it looks like it's going to be, that, when we're all gone 15 years from now, that somehow that's memorialized, because that's our understanding today. But who knows how case law and other things change 10 years, 15 years down the road. And, so I just think it's something that we should make sure that we consider and memorialize however we want to do that, so.
Right, the angle, I guess, or my understanding with the utility easements is I'm assuming that the work that would have to be done on the 12-inch is work that would have to be done on an 85-inch. So city would come in, do their maintenance, if they need to dig it up, whatever, coordinate with the owner would have to come back and make the necessary improvements above the water main. So, but yeah, I agree that it would all have to be specified in that agreement, yeah.
So what you're proposing then, what you're telling us is that when the utility work is completed with 12-inch, any further development north, or should the wastewater area be developed, eventually?
It could be.
Okay, but would it be enough to sustain that then, say, everything that's north of what you're proposing?
Oh, certainly. And I can say that because I know what you get from a 12-inch with that pressure, residual pressure, but it's really going to come down to when WSB takes another comprehensive look at this and what our city needs that hasn't been updated yet, and says, what is the service district we need? They would be looking at that vacant land. They'd be looking at other vacant land out in the township as well and say, this is possible to serve. Because there's really no good reason to put a shallow lift station, for example, or a too small of a water main at this point. We have the opportunity. Let's size it correctly. And what we're doing is trying to format this thing. So we're installing the pipe, we're paying for the pipe up front, but we are asking for some stipulation on the backside as far as the waiver of I'll get to those later, but waiver of connection fees, waiver of the trunk fees to make this all possible. And again, it's under the premise of we're trying to do this in such a way where we're not asking the city to get to wall it for all these different improvements. Now, if in the future WSB comes back and says, you know what, now considering all of this other possible developed area, it may need to be bigger than a 12. And right now we're on record saying, won't make a bigger pipe happen. Because again, it just doesn't make any sense to us to go through all of this effort and put a pipe in there that doesn't fit the developer's needs and the city needs. Because we have the opportunity now. We just want to bring all those things together.
Then one more question, the piping goes under 4th Avenue, the utility, the piping goes under 4th Avenue. Currently, 4th Avenue ends right at the wastewater treatment plant. Is there any indication that 4th Avenue would be opened up to that cul-de-sac that I'm looking at, which was going to be developed? The road.
We looked at that alternative, making it a public road connector through right down to 2. And the developer wasn't in favor of that because of through traffic. And then when we went back to the city to say, well, the developer doesn't always get what we want. When we went back to the city wasn't in favor of the connection through there either. But depends on which group you talk to at this point. There are different city departments that would come in and tell you, or I've heard, this may come down here sometime in the future. But I still think there needs to be some review of that from the city big picture planning with what is our road system going to look like in this area. Because I just, there's been a lot of talk. This was at one point, I guess, a party spot for kids, so they blocked it off, and wasn't maintained or whatever. And I'm pretty sure that this would require an easement in itself. City utility on city property is kind of a gray area, I guess, from here to here. Now, from a fire protection standpoint, we looked at, and it's certainly possible. The developer is not in favor of getting a through street because they want to keep the cul-de-sacs and keep it quiet, they want to put speed bumps in so they keep the traffic speed down. But if there's a need, if we determine that we need another emergency access there, we certainly can make one happen there for another point of access for emergency vehicles. Maybe with a class 4 gate or a gravel road or whatever it takes to get fire trucks in. Is that?
Yes, I'm just wondering if 4th Avenue is determined to be developed to service that area, who pays for that? Who will pay for that?
Where are you pointing?
From the end where it ends now, the street treatment plant starts.
Right about here then?
Where am I at here? I'm at, right? Yeah, right here,
Okay.
right here, all the way in. That would be, if it is open, see, currently closed, would that be considered a private road, or would that then become a city road, which would be more, who would maintain it?
Well, this is a kind of an anomaly here because we aren't often, as developers, proposing water main to go through city property. So we'll have to work out how this legally happens. It's city property now, so you can put whatever public utilities in there you want.
If I can just jump in, Todd, I think that goes along with looking at total development and what does the transportation plan require of us in terms of whether or not we make Fourth Avenue a connection all the way down to 2 on the outside, east side of the development. I made a note here, we need to look at, do we need, you've got an area marked on this map that says future annexation or annexation being considered in that north, in that hatched area. Do we consider that theoretically that extension of 4th Street where it kind of ends? Is that considered a cul-de-sac then? And does it meet the zoning standards for how many houses are on? If that were to develop, how does that look? I think that has an impact as to whether or not we need to do an extension of 4th. And then we need to look at, yes, who pays for it? How does it get paid for? Those types of things. So I think that's a little premature right now, but I've made a note and we'll talk about that as a staff.
Very good.
In short, we aren't proposing that we're doing any street improvements basically from here north. We'll put the water main in, and if there are impacts to the existing infrastructure, we repair those. But we aren't extending roads and putting cul-de-sacs in and whatnot as part of this proposal.
So your proposal is, just like you said, the developer doesn't have intentions of doing that, so that would be a city issue.
Yeah, we need to.
Right.
I think we need to look at 4th Street or 4th Avenue. I'm sorry, I'm still learning the street system. I've only been here 8 weeks.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying at once. I think we need to look at 4th Avenue in conjunction to the annexation that's been tabled and what other opportunities we have in the vicinity and those types of things. So
I think it's important, just what you said earlier, is that 15 years from now, people are, so we need to do that.
Yep.
I agree. And that's why and there's a lot of those types of things that we need to iron out. They need to be vetted, evaluated, and how do they get implemented? Who implements them? Right. So,
Got it. Thank you.
no. Any other questions on the lakes part?
I'd like to interject here if I can. Please forgive me. This was a screw up on my part. My coming in half an hour after the fact. I had 2 appointments on my Tuesday morning, and one covered up the other, and I didn't see it. So, plain screw. Let me ask. This was probably covered earlier, but just maybe a key question: how far down 4th do current utilities, whether they be sewer or water, come?
Well, he has it on the water, the top line is the current water.
Yeah.
So that's as far down as we go. That's as far down as we go for water.
Basically down to here
Correct.
is water.
So
And then
everything he's talking about is additional stuff. And we don't serve electric. We serve, our service territory is the wastewater treatment plant, but there's nothing there. I don't even know if we've got poles right in that corner or not, but this development is currently not in our service territory.
So the sewer lines must come down through the bottom of the golf course there and then over to the plant.
They actually come to a lift station here. There is a main that serves the north part of the city that goes Kigwampus through the golf course. And then this is collected and it all goes to a lift station that's here. And then the force main comes down to the water plant or to the wastewater plant. And this basically is set up to where we aren't, you know, because that's force main, there's always pressure problems and future problems that you'll have with connecting force main to force main. So we're not suggesting we do that. We would do a force main direct to the plant. There would be a structure outside the plant where we dump into, and then it would feed into the plant from that point.
Is there any anticipation that a lift station may be needed for that to compensate for the elevation difference here to the plant?
There absolutely is unnecessary for a lift station. We have one proposed here at the corner right on 2. And the positioning there is kind of key because we want it to be right next to the public right away for access and maintenance and whatnot. And then force mained back to the water plant. So all the system for the sewer in here is proposed to be private. It would be private down to the lift station. At the lift station, it would become public. Lift station and just the lift station structure would be public from there on. So the sanitary sewer collection throughout the whole development is proposed to be private. Any other questions that anybody's thought of?
Okay, go.
And this is by the way, the reason I separated these completely is because this is, I think, where a lot of the confusion comes in. When I call somebody, I do it on the phone where I talk about the lakes and I'm really talking about the village because it's Sherburne Lake, Sherburne Village. So it's a little confusing, but all the lakes development that we've talked about thus far is in the city. What we're going to talk about now is part of an annexation request that we submitted to the city for the property on the south side of County Road 2. Next. There it is. So in addition to the Lakes project, we're also trying to couple this all together with an annexation request that we have for the Sherburne Village, which is an existing mobile home park on the south side of County Road 2. The reasoning behind this is that we have a private sewer system, wastewater system on that site. We have a private well system on that site. And there's maintenance, there's new wells that eventually be needed, there's cost. And so when we plan on doing this project that's within the city, we're looking in the future for ourselves as well. So the city expansion we know is going to happen at some point. And then when we consider the annexation, we would like to bring those online to the city as well, utilities for city water, city sewer. We're not suggesting that any of the on-site sewer system be adopted or owned or maintained by the city. This would be, again, private system that would remain private system forevermore with a connection to the lift station. From that point, it would become public. So same is true with the water. As a 12-inch comes down to County Road 2, we would have a private connection and meter before the connection to the 12-inch. So yeah, that the other major component of this village is that it's currently located in Baldwin Township, Sherburne County, and Sherburne County and Baldwin Township don't have a zone for this use. So right now it's a legal non-conforming use. So if we wanted to go in and put a new clubhouse in, we really couldn't unless we saved exactly the same square footage, the height, the character, everything the same. That would all that would be allowed. We would like to do and consider a park expansion, but the city has a zone for this use. And so the annexation, if approved, we'd like to bring it in and put it into that zone. So it's in conformance with the zoning ordinance that is in. There's currently 96 pads in the village, and we estimate, we didn't count people, but we estimate it's 2.5 residents per. That's about 240 residents in the park right now. We'd like to expand the park for what's shown on your plan in the southeasternmost corner. There's about 40 additional pads there. They primarily be double wides, but another 40 units with 2.5 people gets us up to about 340 total population. Keep in mind, we have an annexation request in now, but we have zero, we've taken no steps for zoning compliance, site plan reviews, anything like that. We're just, again, looking toward the future, looking at the annexation. That's the first step. The next, assuming that goes forward, the next logical step will be looking at site plans and going through the city and WSB reviews and, you know, pretty much essentially what we looked at doing up here, we'll be doing down here as well. So the two different things, the reason it gets a little confusing, one's in the city, one's not. We're trying to get that straightened out right now, but next. This is a map to show the relationship between the city limits, it's all in yellow, and then the 3 parcels that are included in the annexation request. So County Road 2 here, city comes down to this point here because it's contiguous, the annexation is possible, and this part is being requested at this point. Next one. That's just a zoomed in version right now. Keep in mind that there's a lot of vacant land down here, but that's a little misleading in that we have a water system here, we have a wastewater system on site that sit in this general vicinity here, okay? And there's actually a drain field that was over in this area here that's not in service anymore. So there's some things that would have to happen there for a switch over to utilities and things to be converted that would have to be removed, plugged in accordance with county and state standards and whatnot for any of this to be possible. But next one, please. This is just a blow up of the proposed layout to show where the additional 40 units would be approximately. Again, there's existing drain field utilities that are in the way here. So there's a lot of work that would have to occur before this expansion would even be possible. Not to mention all the city reviews would have to take place, all the approvals would have to be in place before anything like this would go forward. But this again is it's a master plan, if you will. Next one. And then the next one. So when we go through the why we're here and what these 2 different projects are, we're trying to couple these together to basically on our side of things, share expense so we can make it all possible. And, you know, because when we're considering, if you see what is a normal development, of course, the developer pays for developer impacts. You know, we go in, we have to do some road improvements. We have to build our own roads, of course, parking lots, utilities, everything associated with that. And this is very unique in that we need water and sewer. And we hope, you know, we've got to work through a lot of details on this, but we hope to have electric as well. We'd like to transfer off Connexus and be part of the city utility system entirely. There are several items that would need to be worked out. And again, I just emphasize how early in the project we are, which I don't like doing these things when we think we have these things molded in concrete, because then the city, of course, steps in and says, well, why haven't this works up here? Like, there's no other options. There's lots of other things that we can work out here. We're at that stage. We want to work out these things. So I just went through again and said, and what we're trying to do to propose this to make it feasible is that we're asking that we put in the water main, we design it, we put it in according to the city standard, city inspect it, and it be the 12-inch water main or whatever that master size water main is, public, be adopted to the city, eventually accepted by the city. We need to work out how we connect individual services to the water main, because again, we don't want to put a private main right next to a public main. So that's important. And getting over the easement versus public right-of-way issue is paramount as well. We're asking that the connection fees for the water and the trunk fees be waived on not only the Lakes project, but the Village project as well. The reason being there is that, of course, the cost is very significant. There's just for the water main extension alone, we're at about $600,000. That doesn't count all the other water service improvements, the services that you have to go in from, whether it be a public or private, the streets, the sidewalk, all the other things that are associated with this development. We included the village in this request too, because they currently have a system that they've been paying for and maintaining over the course since the site was developed. You know, they've done their own systems. We'd like to make it possible that those systems be abandoned, capped, and discontinued, and connected to the city system. Basically, what we're hoping to do here is just make that connection at some point, and those would be immediately become city customers. And in this case, it would be city customer, because one bill would go to that village. We aren't suggesting that we run any water main through that development. It's all existing. It all would remain private and maintained by the park owner. All we're asking is that a meter be put, we can put a meter in eventually and make a connection to this extension, the 12 inch, at some point. I covered the waive of the request to waive the trunk fees. And then from a timing standpoint, they've got current investment here. They're trying to let mature and take advantage of the dollars they've invested. So they're asking that if this is allowed at some point to connect, that it be done over the next 15 years. And they're not really saying we don't want to connect. They're saying they do, but they need some time to let their existing dollars work for them, so to speak. Next. Is this one? Again, these projects are really unique in our opinion. There are several challenges, as there's going to be with anything of this nature. I don't see anything on our end. I haven't heard really anything that's insurmountable. It sounds to me, from what I've heard, that we can solve these challenges that are in front of us. Again, the first reading I just want to give you an idea where the annexation process is. The first reading was last 2 weeks ago.
No, call for the public hearing was 2 weeks ago. So you have to have a public hearing, 30 days notice to the adjacent or the impacted neighbors by certified mail. They have 30 days. We have to do 30 days notice before that. So the public hearing will be May 13th. And then there'll be a first and second reading after that.
That's where we are in the process. And then, the format of these, again, we're trying our best to do this in such a manner that it's economically feasible for the developer. I mean, we want this to be possible from our side of things. We certainly want it to be possible from the city side of things, but it's really under that premise of, we don't want to go to the city and say, well, we need $500,000 of your money to invest in utilities to get to our project. It's, it just isn't the approach that we want to take. We want to do all this work, but we do need some help on the backside with the connections, for example, and the waiver of the trunk fees and whatnot. And then just, again, I know I'm reiterating, but we're trying to do this in such a fashion that, keeping all the departments of the city in the know in the front end of this. And we're just looking for the shape of what does it look like going forward to build some confidence so the developer is confident going forward. So we aren't asking for a show of hands. We aren't asking for any votes. We're just basically open conversation for that confidence level. We really can't ask for those things until you're looking at an application, a formal application, here are all the design, here's all of the calculations, here's everything. But at the end of the day, we're going to have a developer's agreement that kind of sums all this stuff up before we can stick a shovel in the ground. And it's going to include making sure all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted on all the permits that we have to get, making sure all the T's and I's are dotted on all of the reviews and approvals we need from your engineer and your staff and your departments. All those things are coming, and we aren't sidestepping anything. All we're looking for is a framework, if you will. And so that's what we're trying to do. That's the format that we're approaching this in, such that we're trying to keep city goals in the back, I'm not speaking on behalf of your engineer, I'm not speaking on behalf of your staff. We're gonna let them do that and, as normal. And, but we are trying to make this such that future growth is easy, as opposed to having to go back all the way up the system to drag it all the way back south to make something possible. Because then they're gonna be spreading the same boat that we're in. So, is there another slide? I think that was last.
There's one more.
I think I covered all these items. Yeah, I covered all those points. And certainly Keith has this, so if you want to print out or electronic copy of it, give you a copy of it. So with that, I had a movie that had a little short drive-through of the existing facility they have down in Florida right now. One of several that they have, and they're very successful. We're waiting in line to get in that one, as a matter of fact. And it's just very well done. These folks are not new to this community. They've been here for quite a long time. As a matter of fact, Brenton used to serve on the airport board for years. So anyway, are there other questions?
Yeah, I remember when you presented to the city council, there was some discussion about the park dedication fees that you had mentioned that you wanted to have waived and that sort of thing, but I didn't hear anything.
You didn't miss it, and we eliminated that request.
Okay.
So we're going to be paying the parking.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, there was just to bring everybody up to the background of that, we did ask that, I think it was 50% of the park fees be waived at the time. And there was a lot of strong conversations regarding, well, these are the people, that are going to be using the parks and the trails and whatnot. So we evaluated that and eliminated that from our request.
Thank you.
Yeah, I comment on planning commission's position on this.
Well, I could always speak for myself.
Right.
But, and we have a comprehensive plan for the city that we've spent a lot of time on. And, this kind of coming out of that southeast corner of the city, really, there's a lot of, future land development that you really can't see on your maps here. But, yeah, I think, it's great that it's going to be really thoughtfully developed, to make sure that we can serve, 15, 30, 50, 100 years from now. Yeah. Because I think, right now it's all 2.5 acre lots or whatever involvement, but that's not really sustainable in the long term. I think as population growth to develop everything in 2.5 acres. So if there is a way to annex into the city and have, smaller lot sizes, building those lift stations and water mains, whatever for that. This project should and did bring to light that that's a very important connection at that point in the city. I think it's a great project. I know people that would buy in there right now if they hadn't done right now. So,
Yeah.
The need is there. We've done studies on the 55 plus community. I think that's the biggest need as far as housing, affordable housing for that sector. Those are the things I know. The things I don't know, by waiving fees, what does that affect in the future? We waive all fees in the future. What do we set? I don't want to set ourselves up for getting them, setting a precedent. So I don't know how that works. I'm pretty new at this. So I don't know. That's something that would have to be, I'd have to learn more about. It makes sense. To me, it makes sense if someone puts in a line and they pay for it. You don't charge them again to hook up to it, but that doesn't mean that I'm right with that. Well, I need more information on that before I could say one thing or another. But whatever we can do to help get this going, help the developers, I'm for. I don't know what I can do. Just as a point, but But, I would like to help in any way that I possibly could. I just, at this point, I don't know what I can really do, or if you're really asking me to, or us to do.
Well, the big challenges right now are, and we aren't to a point where I've got an easement declaration and language all written out. We're very early. We really need to get over that challenge of, can we put a public utility in a public utility easement as opposed to a right of way? That's one big thing. A lot of the other things that we're talking about are things that are ironed out through planning and through the review process. And when the fire chief gets a chance to look at all this in depth, where are the access points? How many homes are here? Those things be ironed out. The connection to the individual homes is something we have to work out, but I think we can get there just by, if we knew what the city standard was exactly, that we would conform to that, or we could. Or basically, that's really goes back to the developer. Can you make this detail work for your homes? And if the answer is yes, then let's work it out. If it's no, then we're back to private water. But I need to know what that detail is. And then the interesting thing you said too was, I'm not really, when you look at the geography here, we're in, there's other things that are going to weigh in on this design. And for example, there's a big storm sewer flow through that comes across I-69 or 169 and goes through our development and everything, all the water here wants to find Rum River, right? So it goes that direction. And what has prevented development before? Well, that's one reason. We've got water, we've got wetlands. We have a wastewater plant that used to have lagoons here. When we get to this side though, when you look at what is developable, it's crazy. And the 2.5 acres aren't sustainable with public utility, obviously. At what point do we stop using up so much land per home? Because God stopped making land a long time ago, and we got what we got. So that approach, you're absolutely right. Making a sustainable system with your fees and monthly bills and whatnot, you really need that frontage to be limited across everybody's front yard. So, and you're right, we've had nothing but interest in this as far as, I would sign up, I'd live there. And people want this to happen. It's just a really affordable alternative. We're not asking for any TIF or anything like that, but it's, when I say affordable, I have to be careful. But it's an affordable alternative for seniors.
Yeah. And beyond affordable, it's minimal maintenance, which
Right.
is what people are looking for snow burden or whatever.
Absolutely. So yeah, is there a discussion we can have here or at maybe the next meeting after this? You've had some time to think through this, about those concerns and considerations that we can talk about today or next time. It's really up to this. You.
I would like to ask Michelle and Jules, not verbal, I made that clear, but basically the same question that I asked Dan. Do you see this as a favorable development for Prince? Or do you see a great big red flag someplace?
Are you looking for consensus here?
I'm just asking both of you, if you see a red flag right now.
If I can speak from a staff perspective and as the role of staff, our role as a staff is to look at what does the ordinance require. We are the sort of the fact analyzers. So I'm hearing Todd ask for some things, waiving trunk fees, waiving sack and whack. We talked a little bit about transportation connections, and potential future, I'm looking at a water main loop that potentially could encourage the city and the township to maybe look at more annexation besides the one that's identified. Does it make some sense to bring other properties into the boundary of the city? I don't see this as being a bad thing for the city of Princeton, but I think the issue is that we as a staff need to look at the requests, look at the current policies, look at where these funds go in terms of maintenance and capital investments for the rest of the system. And then we need time to come back to both the city council, planning commission, and this utility and say, yep, we can live with waiving the trunk fees, but not the sack and whack, or we can, and again, Commissioner Erickson talked eloquently about what precedent does that set going in the future. I mean, I know when I worked in Elk River 20 years ago, under the height of the building boom, you know, developers didn't want to wait for the city to bond for trunk lines. So, you know, we entered into development agreements and we said, okay, you're going to put the trunk lines in. That's your cost. We're not going to charge you for that, but you're still going to pay SAG and LAC because those fees go into another fund for long-term maintenance and capital repairs. I've made some notes here that, you know, we should check in with like the city of Ramsey. They're undergoing a building boom right now. What is their policy? Can we, I mean, I've been in public service for 35 years almost now. Nothing is ever invented from scratch. We are great at plagiarizing and borrowing and begging from other cities and counties and utilities in order to massage those to fit what we want to do and what we want to accomplish. So that's just from my perspective as a staff person, because again, we have to be sort of the cold-hearted ones to just look at what are the standards and look at the research. It's really up to the council and the planning commission to kind of take into account neighborhood perceptions and the public perception and the public emotion about, you know, extending 4th Avenue. How does that look like? You know, those types of things. We can present recommendations about what we think is the best going, again, because we have to look long term. We as a staff, that's our job, is to not just react to Todd's presentation and say, oh yeah, this is great, let's just give him a blank check. We have to say, well, no, how does that impact the city 10 and 15 years from now? What's the foundation that we're building for future generations? So that's what we're going to look at, is we're going to come back and we're going to say to the elected bodies that have to make a decision, here are your options, but here's what we feel is the best way to go. So.
Michelle, thank you for giving me some time to think. So seriously here though, when we met with you, the last time, I can report that the city council was open to this. They were open to the idea, the concept, and the growth, and things that look good on paper. And this is a nice thing. However, and we still are. I'm open to this, and I'm willing to enforce anything that's good for the city of Princeton. That's what I want to assure the people of the city. That is a good thing. So as this progresses, that's my goal. Is it the right thing to do? And I also have a number of years in public service, and my primary area was law enforcement. And I think the other factors involved here, and since I've been on city council, this is one of the first major development issues that I've been involved in, other than the 42 acres that we purchased in the North Industrial Park. So these things are fairly new, but I do know that when you expand, you also expand the need for service. Not only we've been talking about water and we've been talking sewer and that, but I look at police service. I look at fire protection. Those are areas, and the question I will have weighing on me is, what we do, is it enough to offset those issues as well? Now we're on the verge of annexing the Sherburne Mobile Home Park. That then becomes a city. We are responsible to provide services to that community there. And that's law enforcement and that's fire protection. What we receive in taxes to do that, is it going to offset the additional coverage that has to take place? And those are issues that I think Michelle is right. City staff has to look at, the fire chief has to examine that, our police chief has to examine that, and look at all those issues. To just say, hey, this is great, we're gonna develop this, well, wait a minute. We have to make sure that it's the right thing to do for all of the city of Princeton. And since I've been on city council, 8 years now, or over 8, whatever it is, when we ever talk about annexation, is it going to benefit our city? Is it going to benefit its residents? And that's what I have to be convinced that any project is going to do. So that's where we're at. So that's my opinion. I can't speak for the council. It is that at the last meeting, we agree with this whole concept and the whole, if it works, if it's the right thing to do, and each council member is going to have to make a decision on that, thinking way ahead in the future.
Yeah, and
It's in a nutshell.
I got a clip actually.
Yeah.
Fire protection.
Yeah.
Has anybody ever heard of, or, I mean, would the city have to take that? I mean, right now Sherwood County is providing that. And
That's it. We have our own police department. That would be like saying, the police department is gonna take on the new industrial park or fire protection. It's part of our city, and the city residents pay taxes for.
I understand that. I'm just wondering if it's ever been, like PUC.
Well, you're talking about like the contract law?
PUC has like a territory, like we don't necessarily have that territory for electricity. Correct. So, I mean,
Well, then you would be getting into a contract issue with Sherwood County Sheriff's Office.
Right.
And the way jurisdictions work, if you have your police department, you're responsible for your jurisdiction. Period. There's no, I mean, the sheriff isn't, hey, you annex it, it's yours, it's not mine anymore. However, it gets in more,
I've heard.
it's more technical than that, but.
I read some articles about the city of Forest Lake, like turning it over to the
Yeah.
county or something like that.
There's issue. I worked at, for example, I worked in North Branch as a police chief there for a number of years, and the city and the township merged. And that then became the city of the North Branch's responsibility for policing, fire protection, and everything else. Chisago County no longer was the primary law enforcement agency. It's just the way it works.
There is, of course, and again, it's a staff analysis, but annexation does afford us, obviously, additional property tax revenue for this, so that would offset, but it's all going to come down to budgeting and what is the level of service that, these additional 96 lots, 240 people are going to generate. I mean, I think I've asked Todd to look into that question, and so we'll probably have that answer when it comes to the public hearing in a couple of weeks. So, but again, I think just to kind of end this, or to not really end this because it's not really my meeting, but just to kind of recap, I feel like from a staff perspective, we need to take a look at the numbers, do some research with what other communities do, have a conversation with Keith and our engineers, and come back with, a recommendation as part of some of the questions that Todd has asked. And I think giving staff, sending that presentation out to the staff to take a look at, so that we have more than my scribble, they're pretty readable notes, would be very helpful. And I think we could potentially come back, in a month and say, hey, this is what we looked at, here's some things that we've discovered, and we can make this work with these caveats or whatever they are. And then that would at least give you some clearer direction as to how to proceed.
That would be wonderful.
I mean, if that's agreeable to everybody that's in the room, I would propose that as the next course of action.
I guess I'd just like to add, as a community, and more specifically as a utility, I think we want to be warm and inviting and supportive of growth of our community, because that's, I mean, well, the old thing, or you either grow or die. So I think that growth is about setting precedents. I think is particularly cogent because I had a conversation completely unrelated to anything we're talking about here. The guy said, you know, Princeton seems like it's becoming almost a suburban north suburb. And I said, well, we're not quite there yet, but, you know, with the boom going on in Ramsey, and I think, you know, River's still growing, some of that push is pushing here. When you think about setting a policy or a precedent here, it really has to look down that road 10, 15 years. I'll be getting buried, I mentioned, but it's going to have an impact on that because this community is going to continue to grow. And we want to set something in place that lays a foundation for that kind of growth. And I think we want to be welcoming that growth, but at the same time, we work with people in the future, because this is how we do it now. And I think that's an important part of the process that we need to put in place here. I think you know, I like the idea of relatively low income housing. I'm partial to people that are 55 years and older. Those are kind of like kids for me, but you know, I think it's a plus, and there's seriously a need for that kind of housing in this community, and it's hard to come by. So I think most of what we have to talk about from a utility standpoint, what the heck is the city going to do here? Because whatever we do is kind of predicated on what kind of things the city wants to go forward with. We can help. We are a partner. We can help with things, but it's going to be an interesting month or two.
I agree, and thank you for those comments. You know, when we could do a development, and I've been doing this for 35 years myself, as young as I look, I know it's hard to believe, but not one time. Anyway, but you could have a standard, what I was referring to before as a standard development, where a developer comes in and has 50 or whatever acreages and does everything himself, and still get questioned on. It always happens. But I would, I guess, urge, you know, city council to get involved and say, what's defendable? Because this, in our opinion, is very unique and very defendable. If the city attorney doesn't agree with that, then we'll need to work on that. You know, like you were saying, you know, you're setting the pavement down for the future growth. And this is a big one, because if we make this happen, we're getting over a huge benchmark that I outlined. You know, there's what is prohibited growth in this area up till now. I think I wasn't here for history, but it's the water, it's the wetlands, it's the, you know, it's the challenges in this area. But you get past this area and you start looking at the big picture there, and the opportunities are pretty significant. So I appreciate what you're saying, and
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask the same question that I asked Dan, Jules, and Michelle to keep.
I actually really liked Michelle's response. You know, there's a lot of details here that's the role of staff, is to sit down and kind of go through how all of this works and interrelate to each of the departments. And, you know, Michelle's done a great job in starting to put together development meetings. So we're working on several different projects at the moment, dealing with all of these issues about extending utilities, extending roads, extending city limits, not just for this one, but for other ones. And, you know, I'm going to continue to work with Michelle on that. And I think we just got to work through the details. Like Todd said, we're very early in the process here. And it's going to take some time just to go through those.
If I could speak here, if everybody can hear me.
Hang on a second.
Stephanie's trying to say something.
Can you
Sorry,
hear
Steph, you're
me?
lagging a little bit. Try that again.
I just want to say from a planning and community development perspective that we definitely want to facilitate growth in the city of Princeton. And I think that's a common goal throughout our councils and boards. And it's just seeing it happen in the best interest for all the city residents and also help the landowners achieve their goals. So it's just finding common ground, and it's exciting to see things like this brought forward. So hopefully we can figure out the best route to make this happen for everybody.
I got most of that.
Yeah. Good, good at making that out. Yeah, we, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think, we have Keith and his staff to look at this and work with the city on this. And, once we get something brought to us, then, then we can go from there. Yes, that's how the process works. I have one question now. So I was just thinking, I knew somebody was trying to buy that old Works place.
That's another project we're working together with utilities on.
Right, and so when, I'm not 100% sure, but I think I was told that Culver's now, they put that line in. And then
Correct.
to connect,
So-
you have to pay Culver's back, so I mean, is that?
Correct, so this goes back 15 years or however long Culver's has been there. So yes, there was a developer's agreement. There is a provision in the developer's agreement that it's basically payment in lieu of assessments. Now, when that agreement was written 15 years ago, no one thought it was going to be 15 years before somebody else would want to connect. So if you were to apply the compounded interest in the developer's agreement, the payment in lieu of assessments would be prohibitive in terms of making development work. However, we've had conversations with Coburns and we've connected the developer with Coburns for them to negotiate what a reasonable payment is going to be. So yes, they are in conversation, and we are actually in conversation with the developer in terms of costs for their water service. And so Stephanie and I, Keith, are conversing, have been conversing with the developer. He has a preliminary drawing now. Stephanie worked last week on parking requirements and those types of things for their particular use. And so we anticipate that will be yet another annexation request coming forward once they kind of figure out all their development details. So
Right,
yes.
so that's something you want to stay away from in the future after, experience with the experience that,
I would-
obviously if people were coming in and building beyond Sherburne villages right away, then, this is.
correct, and I think that's a component, and in fact, one of the notes I've made is the developer standing before us, his proposed 12-inch water main is going by land that has been labeled as future annexation. So how do we handle developer A putting in trunk facilities that's going by property B that is going to benefit from the cost of developer A's investment? So that's kind of a policy discussion that we need to, again, as a staff, do some research, do some benchmarking, look at, Ramsey, Elk River, Zimmerman is growing. They probably have some policies in place. There's probably some growth around Monticello, even going to our competitor, we want to consider them that, Cambridge, North Branch, those types of communities. Look at, how are they looking at, their annexations, their extension of utilities, and basically put together that information and then identify the best policy. And maybe there's interlocking policies, maybe there's different ways of handling different situations. I mean, from a zoning policy standpoint, you want to treat similarly situated properties similarly, so you're not playing favorites, you're not being accused of being arbitrary and capricious. But there has to be some flexibility. But what are the parameters under which you can be flexible? And as of right now, today, I don't have enough information to be able to say other than we need to do more research and come back with some policies.
So in other words, what happened 15 years ago is affecting the city. What we're doing now, we need to get it right so that 15 years from now, there's another group of people sitting here. So you got to understand how this all works. We want to make sure that we have everything down the best to our
Yeah, unfortunately, none of us are magicians or have crystal balls that we, all we can do is look at what's happened before, learn from the lessons, and then try to look at what other more creative people are doing and try to figure out what fits for us that encourages growth but doesn't put the future in a position of bankruptcy, going forward.
So because we're cautious, it doesn't mean we're not inviting.
No, it's
We
not
are
our
just very cautious on moving forward. That's all.
Yeah, no, I understand Michelle's position too, and our ask here is not to put you in a poor position. We the owner, it's really come down to the belt. We don't have votes and motions and stuff going forward. It's our opinions that we're going to make a decision on what we heard in our opinions, evaluating what the risk is, and spending the money to get to that point where we can give Michelle that package that has all the surveys and everything she needs to do a comprehensive review and her engineer to do a comprehensive review. So we understand this is a little unorthodox, but there's a lot of money at stake. So, and that's really a follow-up question of mine. Since, the first of the year, things in the city, I don't want to go into the details on this, but are running a lot more efficiently. No comments. With that being said, though, can we have a point person? Can Michelle be our point person? And so that all of our information goes to one and then goes out to all the departments instead of me going to several? Or give me direction on how you want me to proceed.
So if I can jump in, so what I would like to propose is, first of all, that we get the presentation, we look at the asks, and come back to this body, and we'll do an info to the city council about the research that we've identified in terms of the asks, so that we all kind of know. We may not have a recommendation, but at least we can provide information that we've done research and we've followed up. And actually, as the community development manager, since my plate is meeting big site boards, I would actually like Stephanie to be the point person. She's extremely competent. This is really in her wheelhouse. And so I will be by her side, but it's really, I would really like her to be the point person, because not that I'm not interested in development, but I think my expertise can be used to support her in this role while I'm working on other things on my plate as well. So
that's the direction.
correct. So I would like, and I texted, we've got some other things that we're kind of working with plan related, keep alluded to. So I think we're probably in the next 30 days going to have somewhat of a group think meeting that will pull outside of your specific project, but just some general policy things that we want to talk about. We'll have a group think with all the development related departments together and conversation, but I would like Stephanie to be your first.
And I agree as well. I mean, development is the purview of the city. And we are supported, we're infrastructure. So I really would, yeah, I agree. Going through Stephanie and Michelle and I communicate a lot, so that, and as well as the other departments.
Yeah.
So, but the city should be the lead on how this community wants to grow and develop in the future, so.
Right. Just to, I know the process, I get it, and it needs to go to the city. You have two bodies here that are equal in power, and we were being directed to come here before the first
You
year.
have two bodies that are independent.
Oh, independent, whatever.
But, you know, it is one of those things when it comes to, let's take water as an example. You know, I believe there's an ordinance in there that says that we can't really go outside city limits. You know, there are questions like that, and when there's just a lot of nitty-gritty details that staff's going to have to work through and understand what this means in the future. So we are tied together, so that's why I agree with Michelle.
And I do too. My point of saying that wasn't point finger at anybody. It's that when we did go to city council, just do an informal presentation, the questions came up, well, what is PUC said? Have you been there yet? I'm like, well, no, I mean, we go to the city. You know, that's where it kind of got off track. If there is.
Well,
But
so comment on that, I remember that conversation, it wasn't what PUC was saying regarding development, this proper rule. This PUC saying about can you bring utilities to that area? That was the question. Right. That's why we told you should meet with public utilities. Yes. I remember.
This is like, so if we ask to hear from the developer, as long as we have one state. If there's any questions.
Sure, Mr. Developer, which one are you? Raise your hand.
This is true.
Did you ask a question directly to us? We are having a little bit of a hard time hearing. Is it?
The chair just wanted to know if you had any questions or any comments you wanted to share with the group.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I wanted to say or reiterate is we will be team players and we want it to be good for the community. And we would have a lot of pride of ownership in our business. So I'm very pleased that the conversation, the dialogue is positive, and we want to do whatever you guys want us to do.
Okay, good, thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
If I may, for folks, just so everybody's aware, the lagging problem we had last time was a lag from my laptop to the TV. If you go watch the video, I didn't notice it last time, so if you want to hear more of what Stephanie said, just to make sure you understand, or developers, feel free to check that out.
Anything else, folks? In that case, I would entertain the motion. I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Oh, sorry.
Motion is passed.